A vile, perverted old man has ill intentions toward a young boy. Noticing something was wrong, Carter tells the boy to stay away. Not only does the man not leave, but he also starts to grope the boy. Carter, who has a deep-seated hatred for evil, can no longer stand it. The boy bends down and picks up a liquor bottle. His young friends scatter in fear, but Carter is blocked by the pervert. The enraged pervert wants to throw the boy off a cliff. In a life-or-death moment, Carter uses a small knife in his hand to stab the pervert's arm, thinking he had escaped. The old man's clutches. Little did he know this was the beginning of a lifelong nightmare, because that white pervert was a major figure in the political world. Soon after, young Carter is taken to the police station, charged with attempted armed robbery and injuring an official. Police Chief Dupriss is a virulent racist. In Dupriss's eyes, black people are born violent criminals, and Carter, having committed this crime, deserved to die. Since Carter was only 11 and couldn't be sent to prison, Dupriss sent him to a juvenile detention center for 10 years. He would only have a chance to return to society at the age of 21. From then on, Carter began a hellish life in the detention center. 8 years passed in a flash. Unable to bear life in the detention center, Carter escaped under the cover of night, heading towards the free world he had always longed for. After escaping, Carter served in the army for several years. During his service, his life underwent a major transformation. He not only realized that knowledge and tolerance could liberate black people, but also overcame his stutter, even becoming the European middleweight boxing champion, when he joyfully returned to his hometown and went to a bar to celebrate a new life. He was immediately drawn to a beautiful woman. Before he could approach her, another man sat down in front of him. Carter was about to teach the man a lesson with his fists, but the beautiful woman, Lesra, quickly stepped in and invited Carter to dance. The two danced in the club to the mellow music. Lesra told Carter, "Your hands aren't just for fighting." They both fell for each other at first sight. Just when it seemed a beautiful life was about to begin, that very evening, as Carter walked Lesra to her door, Dupriss, having heard of his return, arrived with his men. Dupriss demanded he return to serve the remaining 2 years of his previous sentence. Knowing Dupriss's power, Carter could only helplessly follow them into the car. Imprisoned, Carter did not collapse, but channeled all his sorrow and anger into strength. Every day, he engaged in high-intensity boxing training or constantly read and studied to improve his knowledge. He planned to turn his body into a weapon, then use it to win back his freedom or take down those who had imprisoned him. 2 years later, Carter was finally released. Stepping out of the prison gates, he was like a man reborn, and he silently swore to himself he would never set foot in prison again. Because he had maintained a high intensity of training in prison, his boxing skills had not diminished, but had significantly improved. In his first match back, his opponent was an undefeated white champion. Carter turned all his hatred into powerful punches. A storm of blows rained down on the white champion's head. Throughout the match, the white champion had no ability to fight back. Before the first round ended, the champion was knocked to the floor and couldn't get up. His powerful boxing technique and speed were like a hurricane. Thus, he earned the nickname, the Hurricane. After winning match after match, he also married Lesra, the woman he had met in the bar 2 years prior. Seeing Carter achieve success in both love and career, beloved by all, made Dupriss, who had never let go of his grudge, feel deeply uncomfortable. This was a special period when the racial struggle in America was quite intense. Although the law had granted black people equal rights, its implementation was fraught with difficulties. Seeing black people being beaten and abused on TV made Carter, now a famous figure, feel incredibly outraged. A nearby reporter took the opportunity to ask him a loaded question. "If you hate these policemen so much, why don't you stand up and fight back?" Carter replied with his true thoughts in a joking tone, "The police who hate black people, they all deserve to die." Carter had even said, "If you let me, I could take down 5 of them at once." Although he warned the reporter not to publish this, the next day it became the front-page headline. This immediately fanned the flames of white hatred towards black people. That night, the windows of Carter's house were smashed with rocks, accompanied by threats to kill naggers like them. His wife believed he shouldn't have said such things in public. Carter understood this well, but he didn't want to keep pretending to be a dead puppy. However, he didn't know what he would face next. Soon after, Carter had another boxing match. An enraged Carter unleashed his full energy. His ferocious punches drove his white opponent into the corner of the ring, turning him into a living punching bag. If the referee hadn't intervened, the opponent might have been knocked out directly. However, even in such a clearly dominant match, in an era where white people did not accept black people, the final result was still a win for the white man. Hearing this result, the audience in the stands booed in protest. Carter just smiled bitterly and left the ring. He was all too familiar with the unjust treatment from white people. That evening, with a heavy heart, he went to a bar to unwind. He thought that if he didn't resist, everything would be fine. But things were not that simple. As he was drinking in the bar, a murder occurred at a nearby bar. 2 black men had used guns to kill 3 white people in the bar, then quickly fled in a white car. Coincidentally, Carter was also driving a white car that night. On his way home, he was stopped by the police. The police saw that the white car did indeed have 2 black men in it. Immediately, both were taken to the crime scene, although a witness shook his head, confirming he was not the killer. Duprice, who had always hated him, was not going to let him go so easily. Soon after, Duprice arrived. Although Carter repeatedly insisted he had nothing to do with the incident, to put him in prison, Duprice coerced 2 witnesses into giving false testimony, saying Carter was the murderer they had seen, threatening them with consequences if they didn't comply. Faced with Duprice's threats, they were forced to agree. Soon, Carter was brought to trial. Not only was the judge white, but there wasn't a single black person on the jury. In such a situation, coupled with Duprice's false testimony, the final outcome was predictable. For 3 lives, Carter was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences. His wife was devastated upon hearing the news, while the white people beside them laughed with unusual glee. Carter stood stunned, his face in disbelief. He couldn't understand why the world treated him this way, and had no idea when the justice black people longed for would ever come. Unable to fight the powerful white legal system, Carter ultimately couldn't keep his vow to never enter prison again. When he arrived at the prison, he refused to wear the prison uniform that symbolized guilt, asserting, "I am not guilty. It is the current law that is guilty against me." He was then taken by the prison warden to a dark cell for 90 days. As the iron door slammed shut, Carter's soul felt bound by invisible chains. The environment was dark and cramped, without a shred of light, only a light at the door that flickered on and off, marking the silent passing of each day. Carter tried to endure the solitude, but an intense feeling of helplessness began to cause him to hallucinate. Vaguely, 2 voices constantly echoed in his ears. One, with an incredibly arrogant and strong attitude, told Carter to use his fists to fight against his current adversity. The other voice was meek and weak, constantly pleading softly, "What do we do now?" The 2 voices clashed fiercely in his mind. In reality, Carter didn't know what to do either, only able to cover his head with a blanket and sob silently. In the end, Carter persevered through his strong will. When the 90 days were over, Carter's white shirt was tattered, but his dignity and soul remained pure and untainted. To declare his innocence, he still wore that old suit. The warden, admiring his will, made an exception and found him a white shirt without stripes or a prison number. This was Carter's minimum demand to assert his innocence. In prison, Carter suddenly realized that if the white man's punishment was only to keep him in jail, then as long as he didn't conform to the prison, they couldn't punish him. He refused to do labor or eat prison food. Every day he was busy studying his case from beginning to end. From his arrest and trial to his conviction, he continuously appealed to higher courts, but for 7 years he received the same result. At this point, Carter felt hopeless. Perhaps he would have to live in prison for the rest of his life. To not be a burden to his wife on the outside, and also to rid himself of desires and attachments, he directly asked for a divorce. Although his wife was heartbroken and unwilling to leave, Carter turned and walked away without looking back. To maintain his resolve, Carter began to live by his own schedule. When others were awake, He slept. When others slept, he was awake. He became emotionless, with only his will and resilient spirit remaining. He believed that as long as he had no desires, as long as there was no prison in his heart, no one could imprison him. To find a reason to live, he began to try writing a book about his experiences. The compelling content of the book was recognized by a publisher. Soon his book, The Sin, note the actual book is the 16th round, was officially published. Its captivating content not only filled bookshelves, but was also translated into many languages and sold worldwide. The public was deeply moved by his story and began to spontaneously organize street marches. Not only did many celebrities stand up to support Carter, but even the boxer Muhammad Ali spoke out for him. A white singer even wrote a song called Hurricane dedicated to him. However, all of this had little effect. Just when Carter was despondent, a young black boy who could create miracles appeared. The boy, Lesra Martin, happened to read Carter's autobiography, and its wonderful content immediately captured his attention. Seeing Carter's experience, also coming from the slums, the boy saw a reflection of his own past. Lesra was smart, quick-witted, and had superior intelligence from a young age, but due to his poor family, he had no opportunity for education. By chance, he met 3 white Canadians who felt he was a promising individual. After getting his parents' consent, they took him to Canada to live and study with them. To better experience Carter's life, Lesra also began to practice hitting a punching bag and boxing at home. Under his influence, the few white people also began to read Carter's autobiography. When they read the part where Carter described himself as an emotionless machine that would soon fade with the wind and be forgotten by everyone, Lesra felt immense sorrow for Carter's fate and thought he should do something for him to help him persevere. So Lesra started to try writing letters to Carter, expressing his admiration and thoughts. Soon, Lesra was ecstatic to receive a reply. He couldn't believe his idol would actually write back. Carter wrote in his letter, "Reading your letter makes me feel warm and cared for. I have found new hope and faith in life." As the two continued to correspond, they gradually became confidants who hid nothing from each other. Sometime later, Lesra decided to visit Carter. On a rainy, stormy day, Lesra arrived outside the place where Carter was being held. Though they had never met, Lesra recognized Carter instantly in a corner. Carter was very impressed by Lesra's courage to travel thousands of miles to be there. When they talked about the 3 white people who had adopted Lesra, Carter, who had always been prejudiced against white people, had suspected they had ulterior motives. However, this time he was wrong. Seeing that Lesra could live happily with them, he advised Lesra like a father to study and write well, because writing is a weapon far more powerful than fists. At this point, Carter was completely different from before. He had spent half his life training his body to be a weapon, yearning to smash all injustice with his fists. But now, he finally understood that growing up with hatred only turns oneself into a beast. Only by elevating one's thinking can one achieve true liberation. His many years in prison had not broken his spirit. On the contrary, they had forged an intellectual who would not bow to life. The meeting time was always short. As Lesra left, he and Carter took a photo together. This meeting was like a sudden ray of sunshine, piercing through Carter's clouded soul, also making him gradually feel hope. Carter, who still didn't believe there were good white people, asked a fellow inmate who had traveled the world. The inmate told him that not all white people are bad. "I was saved by a white person 3 times. This threw Carter, who had hated white people to the bone, into conflict. He began to look inward. He finally broke down the prejudice in his heart and wanted to meet them. Soon, led by Lesra, they came to the prison together. The meeting was quite cheerful. The 3 white people were eager to learn the details of the case so they could help the wrongly accused Carter. Thinking of all he had suffered at the hands of white people, Carter, who no longer had any illusions, didn't want to say much. When they asked again, Carter suddenly became very agitated. The atmosphere became extremely tense. The meeting ended unhappily. As they parted, they left Carter a gift. He opened it and found his boxing robe. The warmth from these friends immediately moved Carter deeply. He expertly put on the robe and instantly rediscovered the feeling of being in the ring. Then he threw frantic punches into the air. In that moment, he decided to trust these three white people, to believe they were good people who came to help him. Not to let them down, he resolved to continue the fight. In their correspondence, Lesra always sent Carter warm photos of them together. All of this became Carter's spiritual support, filling the void of helplessness that had long been in his heart. Just when it seemed things would go smoothly, reality is always harsher than ideals. One day, they suddenly received a call from Carter, but the result was still the news that his appeal was denied. Before Lesra's friends could comfort him, Carter hung up abruptly. Sometimes people are not afraid of facing disappointment, but when hope is ignited, only to be extinguished. Again, the blow is often fatal. Carter once again shut the door to the fight in his heart. He wrote Lesra and his friends a final letter, hoping they would not reply or contact him again, because their love only made him weak, and the weak find it hard to survive in prison. Another year passed. One day, Carter received another letter from Lesra. Although he remembered Carter's instruction not to write, he wanted to share two things: a photo of him and his girlfriend, and his high school diploma. In fact, in Lesra's heart, he had long considered Carter his guide. It was because of his influence that Lesra's life found direction. Carter looked at Lesra's letter, lost in thought, his heart stirred once more. That day, the friends received another call from Carter. They thought it might be good news, but the result was that Carter was on the verge of breaking. The friends, who had long considered Carter family, made a bold decision. Soon, Carter received another call from them. They told Carter to look out the window across the street. The light in a room upstairs was flickering. It turned out they had moved directly across from the prison. They not only wanted to be with Carter spiritually, but also wanted to do everything in their power to clear his name. They promised, "If we can't get you out, we won't leave this place." This heartwarming decision from his friends immediately moved Carter deeply and gave him the motivation to re-examine the case once more. To quickly uncover the truth, the group sought out the pro bono lawyer who had always helped Carter. The lawyer didn't have high hopes for these amateurs, because this case was too complicated and the trial period too long. Many ordinary people and not a few celebrities had come to help before, but all eventually gave up due to the time-consuming nature and lack of hope. After expressing their determination, the friends received nearly 10 tons of documents from the past 10-plus years. During their next meeting, Carter warned them to be very careful because clearing his name could push many people's buttons. Through a conversation, they learned that the time of the report that night was 2:45 a.m. There were several witnesses, and the motive was that the bar did not serve black people, leading to a revenge killing. Then, the group began to organize the 10 years' worth of documents. As the documents on the wall grew, just as they were getting some leads, Carter received a threat from the prison warden. "If you want to live safely, stop investigating, whether it's you in prison or your friends outside." However, the three white friends did not give up. They first went to the home of an old witness, only to have the witness's wife open the door. The witness had died under mysterious circumstances before the trial. Although they couldn't meet the person, they got a crucial piece of information. That bar not only served black people, but was also very friendly to them. This showed that the police's so-called motive of racial hatred was completely baseless. Just as they got a lead, the friends were cornered by Duprice on a street. Duprice threatened them. "You'd better go back to Canada immediately, or I'll make your lives miserable." Then he got in his car and sped off. This made the friends a little worried. To ensure his safety, they sent Lesra back to Canada, leaving the remaining three to continue searching for clues. Carter saw the worry in the woman's eyes. He said, "I'm very happy to see your selfless dedication. If you want to go back, I can understand." However, the woman replied firmly, "As long as you're not out, we won't leave." After an open conversation, Carter gave them another clue. A private investigator had submitted photos and evidence, but there was no record of it. That very night, The group tirelessly went to the detective's house, only to find he had also passed away years ago. They found the detective's notes in storage. The note showed that the time the police received the report was 2:28 a.m. Carter had left the bar at 2:30 a.m. Clearly, he had no time to commit the crime. However, the police record showed the time of the report as 2:45 a.m. Someone had clearly tampered with the time. After some effort, they found the time card from that night. Carter recognized the handwriting on it. It turned out that all the writing was done by Duprice, because at age 11 it was this very signature that had sent him to prison. He would recognize it even if it were burned to ash. This was enough to prove that everything was Duprice's doing behind the scenes. He not only bribed the key witness, but also secretly altered the relevant data. This crucial discovery became the key to overturning the entire case. To stop them from investigating further, Duprice resorted to dirty tricks. He secretly tampered with their car, hoping to get rid of them in a car accident. However, fate was not on his side. Although the car had a serious problem, luckily none of them were injured. With the evidence collected, the next step was to submit it to the local court or the federal court. The two lawyers and Carter had a dispute. Carter believed they should bypass the state court and file directly with the federal court. However, the lawyer said that if the federal court refused to hear the case, this newly collected evidence could never be used again. This meant he would never have another chance. However, Carter was willing to take the gamble. He believed the federal court was a place of humanity. Being over 50, he didn't want to wait any longer. More than 30 years in prison is more than enough, and many friends by my side have been endangered because of me. The lawyer finally agreed to Carter's request. On the day of the trial, all his fellow inmates came to see him off. Carter walked with steady steps like a fighter about to enter the ring. This was a verdict that seemed destined for the side of justice to fail. The justice emphasized the risk of bypassing the state court to submit new evidence. Once rejected, there would be no more chances. The prosecutors' faces were all gleeful. However, Carter remained firm in his decision to submit the new evidence. Seeing this, the justice allowed Carter's lawyer to proceed. This made the unprepared prosecution lawyers nervous, as they had assumed the justice wouldn't even consider the case and hadn't prepared to argue it. Seeing the judge give an affirmative answer, the burden in Carter's lawyer's heart was finally lifted. He then began to present the entire case. The lawyer pointed out that the entire case was a fraud. The police and the prosecution had colluded to forge evidence and distort the truth. The reason behind it was simply racism. Seeing the judge was willing to consider their testimony, Carter couldn't contain his emotions. Years of grievances in that moment all turned into simple words. I ask you, sir, to look closely at this evidence. Don't ignore the truth. Don't go against your conscience. Don't disregard the law. Return to the highest principle of the rule of law. Please grant me justice. Finally, the judge upheld the original spirit of the law. To allow a conviction based on racism to stand would be an insult to the Constitution of the United States. Immediately, the judge declared Carter innocent and ordered his immediate release. A life of 30 years of wrongful imprisonment had finally come to an end. Carter had finally won his physical and spiritual freedom. Everyone present cheered for Carter. His fellow inmates also celebrated wildly for him. Stepping out of the courthouse, he looked up at the sky. In that moment, he finally saw the sunlight once again. The Hurricane is an American biographical film directed by Norman Jewison, starring Denzel Washington, released in 1999. The film is based on the true story of middleweight boxer Rubin Hurricane Carter. In his boxing career, Carter won a total of 27 victories, but in 1966 he was arrested for murder. Although there were many holes in the witness and physical evidence, he was still convicted. He completed his autobiography, The 16th Round. This book brought him a great deal of public support. Musician Bob Dylan wrote a song called Hurricane. 30 years later, a federal judge ruled that the charges against Carter were built on racism, not objective facts. Carter was then declared innocent. In 1993, the World Boxing Association awarded Carter a championship belt. He also became the only boxer to receive a gold belt after retirement. Carter and his 3 white friends moved to Canada, where he became the president of the Association in Defense of the Wrongly Convicted. The film uses many techniques of interweaving flashbacks. Carter's story is recalled through Lesra reading the book. The first half of the film shows the torment in the dark, especially the helplessness on Carter's face when he is convicted, making the audience deeply feel that emotion. The second half is a redemption of love and soul. It breaks through the constraints of reality and questions the human soul. The theme of the film seems to be a struggle against racism, but deeper down, it's about the fragility of human nature, intense love, and the resilient attitude of the hurricane. Carter was imprisoned by white people due to racism, but his eventual turnaround was also impossible without the help of white people. In presenting its views on race, the director was sufficiently measured. In reality, too, not all conflicts are black and white. They are often mixed with good and bad. No one is born entirely good or entirely bad. Perhaps in that era, the lives of black people were very difficult, but accepting a harsh fate and constantly struggling to survive, this fighting spirit is what the film wants to express. Carter used his perseverance to ignite a resilient storm, of self-awareness, using his fists to smash the baseless injustices around him. The arrogant and corrupt can only hide within the system, but the footsteps of resistance will never stop. The voice seeking truth will never fade. Carter always held on to his indignation, using the fire in his heart to forge a holy sword against a dirty world. He overcame everything that weighed him down. No matter what trouble his actions brought, he always stuck to his beliefs and created a miracle, awakening himself from a muddled world and being reborn in a living hell. We can also be Carter in our own reality. When facing difficulties, as long as we stick to our beliefs and never give up, the moment we look up, we will surely welcome our own hurricane. The value of a film lies in its reputation, and the value of a film review lies in its feeling. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What did you think of this film?